his mark everywhere. In the lowest dives, down the darkest alleyways, on street corners.
Life gives you tension headaches, and this stuff takes them away.
The pusher doesn't miss a trick, and his is the deadliest one of all. The big fix. Once you're in it, there's no way out.
Whether obtained through legal sources or sold on the street, the effects of downers are similar. They all can block or slow pain messages, reduce anxiety, induce sleep, depress respiration and heart rate, and slow physical reactions. Stronger downers like heroin can also induce a rush and a high.
I've taken things like Vicodin, codeine before. I've like when they're prescribed for me, and I've abused them at other times because I like the feeling. And the first time I did heroin, it was like taking a bunch of Vicodin. It was euphoric, relaxing. I think I'm an opiate person.
The three main groups of downers, also called depressants, are opiates, sedative hypnotics, and alcohol. All of these depressants affect the same neurotransmitters. The main ones are endorphins, enkephalins, GABA, and of course dopamine. Opium from the opium poppy is the raw ingredient or molecular model for a whole family of medications prescribed to calm diarrhea, treat headaches, and most notably, control pain. Opium refinements, called opiates, include prescription medications like morphine, OxyContin, Vicodin, and Percodan, as well as the illegal street drug heroin.
It's like putting all your troubles in one bag, and then you got a solution for it. That's heroin. Oh, you got one problem then is to worry about getting your heroin every day.
Started with Vicodin. I take like 2 to see how I'd feel, and I'd feel a little buzz, then eventually I'd end up taking around 5, but then it'd move up. I'd be like, this is pointless. Percocet's 2 Vicodin, So then I moved up to Percocet, take 2 or 3 of those, and then you'd feel it. And then OxyContins.
Synthetic legal variations, called opioids, include methadone, Demerol, fentanyl, Dilaudid, and Darvon. Legal opiates and opioids are often diverted and misused.
I've used OxyContin, chewed them up. I have used, Vicodin, Norco, Percocet, Percodan in the earlier days, Darvocet, Ibuprofen, just about anything I could find. I raided people's medicine cabinets also.
The main use of opiates and opioids, pain control, occurs because these drugs block substance P, the neurotransmitter that signals pain. Normally, when an injury, such as a severe burn, occurs, substance P is released to let the person know that tissue damage is occurring. The body then limits the pain by releasing endorphins, which latch onto the sending neuron and signal it to stop releasing substance P. In addition, some of the endorphins actually block the receptor sites and stop the substance P that does get through. When the pain is too intense, people use drugs to control it. When a person takes an opiate or opioid, it mimics the body's own endorphin-based pain control system through the same mechanism. It latches onto the sending neurons, inhibiting the release of substance P and blocking the receptors on the receiving neuron.
Demerol seem to be holding pretty well, or do you think you're going to need some more?
This slows down the pain.
There is a myth that being prescribed prescription sedatives and prescription opiate painkillers leads to addiction, while being prescribed drugs and using them for medical treatment rarely actually leads to addiction. What usually happens is somebody has a genetic or environmental predisposition and gets prescribed these things, becoming an addict. And then there's also the situation where you have recovering people who have been maintaining the recovery for years, but then need these medications for a medical purpose, get prescribed them, and that causes a relapse.
I had Percocet after the birth of my first child, and I loved them. I started in the hospital saving up enough so I could get loaded. Didn't take them for the pain, just like the feeling.
The second major effect of opioids is on the autonomic nervous system. Respiration, heart rate, and most bodily functions are slowed and depressed.
The increased use of methadone to treat pain has also resulted in a number of increased overdoses. In fact, it's become one of the leading causes of drug overdoses across America. It's actually that you get more overdose deaths from methadone than you do from overdose deaths from heroin.
The third major effect of the stronger opioids, such as heroin, hydrocodone, or OxyContin, is the intense high or euphoria they can induce by releasing excess dopamine. This impacts the nucleus accumbens in the reward reinforcement pathway in the same way as other addictive drugs. That rush, for first-time users in particular, can be indescribable and, unfortunately for most, not repeatable.
But when I first started using it, I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And till one night I wasn't feeling good. And I didn't know that I could get a habit from it.
Opiate dependence develops because of tolerance, tissue dependence, fear of withdrawal, and alterations in the reward reinforcement pathway.
Tolerance and tissue dependence to addictive drugs are really interrelated. As the brain reacts to addictive substances to accommodate them or to block them or to get them somehow out of the body, it's also causing brain cells to build up a reaction, a counter-reaction to those drugs, so that once the drug is no longer there, they go into what's called a withdrawal phenomena.
Tolerance develops through several mechanisms as the brain tries to protect itself from repeated exposures to foreign substances. One is that the body metabolizes the drug faster than normal. The nerve cells become less sensitive to the effects of the drug. The brain learns to compensate for effects by using other parts of the brain. And receptor sites retreat from the excess endorphins into the membranes of the receiving nerve cells through a process called downregulation.
Really cheap when you're starting out.
Really cheap.
I mean, a $15 bag would last us, the two of us, like 2 or 3 days when we were first starting out. And like later on, like at this point, we're spending $120 a day just to stay well.
It would take 4 to 6 bags to each of us to stay well, not even like really get high.
After a person's body and brain have changed to adapt to the excess drugs, a cessation of use causes the body to suddenly attempt to return to normal, even though the changes might have taken place over weeks, months, or even years.
I could take up to 80 milligram Oxycontins at a time at the end, and that would last for about maybe 5 hours. Then I would go into withdrawal, which would be just like doing heroin, and I'd become very depressed, suicidal. My skin would itch, I would ache to the bone.
Withdrawal, oh gosh, that's the one thing that keep a lot of people using, kept me using. I would have plenty of heroin, all the things on my mind, dread the day I've got to kick this habit.
Stomach cramps, not just stomach cramps, diarrhea, everything that can go wrong with your intestinal tract happens. Your legs, you kick constantly at night. I think they call it kicking. Your legs will jerk and kick uncontrollably and keep you up. You have insomnia. You vomit.
I have at times wished I was dead. That's how severe it would be, rather than go through this. I've seen people in jail try to hang themselves. I've seen people in jail shoot their own urine to try to get the heroin out of the urine that's left in there.
Over time, extensive changes in the reward reinforcement circuit, along with the development of tolerance and tissue dependence, lead to addiction.
I was ordering them off the internet and getting them daily. That I couldn't get enough, and I had to just maintain. I wanted to feel normal, and at that time, just to feel normal, I needed about 12. I was getting number 10 Vicodin.
The reinforcement of drug use is so powerful that satisfying the craving for the drug becomes a user's main focus in life. Common sense is often a casualty.
Heroin can come into town today. It's all over town. 2 people died off of heroin. Everybody's looking for it. They know it's good heroin, know it's strong, and everybody in town is trying to get to that heroin.
Among heroin abusers, the preferred method of use is injection because it delivers more of the drug in the shortest period of time and delivers a more intense high. Unfortunately, with this method of use, overdose is often possible.
I woke up Monday morning in the hospital. I OD'd on whatever it was I took. Woke up Monday morning, lost a day and a half in there, and they pumped my stomach.
Other consequences of injection drug use are needle-related infection.
Abscesses have been a big problem. I don't know why, but some people are just more sensitive than others to getting abscesses, and I'm one of those people. But I've also, I've lost all my veins. I've hit nerves. I've hit arteries, which if you shoot up into an artery, it's extremely painful.
1 million Americans are infected with the HIV virus that causes AIDS, while 4 million are infected with the hepatitis C virus.
Hepatitis C is rampant in the drug abusing community, and especially so in those drug abusers who use needles or inject drugs into their system. Hepatitis C is a very, very slow-acting infection in that it starts to eat away your liver, and a good portion of the people who are infected with hepatitis C will have a total liver failure within about 20 years.
Actually, both my parents passed away from hepatitis C just in the last few years, like 6 months apart. So that's what doing drugs did to them, and they contracted hepatitis C 30 some years ago, like before I was born, from shooting heroin. That's what this is all about on my arm. It says, in loving memory, Mommy and Daddy.
Sedative hypnotics have been around since the 19th century. These drugs, from bromides to barbiturates, to Miltown, to benzodiazepines, have been used to relieve anxiety, diminish emotional pain, and induce sleep. The most widely used sedative hypnotics over the last 35 years have been the benzodiazepines such as Xanax, Klonopin, and Valium.
Benzodiazepines are among the most wonderful and most terrible medicines in medicine. Virtually everybody who has major surgery gets a short-acting benzodiazepine as part of induction of surgery to take advantage of the fact that when you give a bolus of a strong short-acting benzodiazepine, you get retrograde and anterograde amnesia. And nobody wants to remember going under anesthesia or listening to the saw or the knife.
Benzodiazepines and other sedative hypnotics have also been called alcohol in pill form because they cause the same lowered inhibitions, muddled thinking, loss of muscle control, and aggression when one drinks too much.
The benzo problem patient of the 90s is different than the benzo problem patient of the 2000s. I think in the 90s it was more anxiety, alcohol, polysubstance abuse that way. These days, I think there's a lot of benzo use in the heroin crowd. It's used along with opiates.
The difference between a heroin high and a benzo high would be that heroin would take me out, and the Valium or the Xanax, in my case, would just lower my hyperactivity.
Like opioids, excess use of sedative hypnotics can depress the respiratory system and heart rate to dangerous levels. The greatest danger and the most emergency room visits occur when alcohol, another downer, is used at the same time as a benzodiazepine or opioid. This occurs because the liver becomes incapable of simultaneously filtering both drugs, allowing the sedative or opioid to enter the bloodstream at full concentration. The abuse of prescription drugs, whether through overprescription by physicians, diversion of legitimate supplies, or counterfeiting of wanted medications has led to a number of cycles of sedative hypnotic abuse.
I really had a hard time accepting the fact that I was addicted to benzos. I had, because they were so easy to get, there was no really illegal aspect to it.
Many of the overdoses are due to experimentation by teenagers with different combinations of pills at farm parties.
I don't know, just kids had them, or like my friends' parents, like cabinets or whatever.
My best friend's mom had little prescription bottles of Percocet and Vicodin, like hundreds of them, and so we just take them at school, just go to school.
Well, I would take it sometimes, like, from people that I knew, like, friends' moms, but that was when I was, like, really shady, like, when I used to, like, do anything for drugs. But, like, I got prescribed it a couple times for, like, colds, because I kind of, like, lied to them, was like, yeah, like, Advil doesn't work for me, like, ever, and, like, I need harder drugs. And, like, my mom kind of just, like, went along with it.
Because sedative hypnotics, including Rohypnol and GHB, cause amnesia, they have been slipped into the drinks of unsuspecting women to make them vulnerable to sexual predators. They are known as date rape drugs.
They took advantage of me while I passed out at a party, and I was sleeping on the couch, and I woke up and they were doing stuff to me that they shouldn't have been doing, and I remember running into the bathroom and throwing up and then sleeping on the floor that night.
In recent years, newer sedative hypnotics, including Ambien, Lunesta, Rosarum, Lyrica, and Sonata, have become popular. The long-term effects of these medications and their addiction liabilities are being continually examined.
These substances have great potential to be good medications. They have amazing psychoactive effects and change the way a person thinks and feels. But we also have to always be aware that they have great potential for abuse and addiction as well.
Tell your doctor if you're taking other medications or if you have any muscle pain or weakness.
If you experience
this may be
a
a
serious
sign of a
allergic
rare but
reaction,
serious side
severe
effect.
abdominal pain, or become constipated for 3 or more days,
The
tell
most
your
common
doctor
side
right
effect
away.
is a temporary burning sensation.
Some people may experience fainting.
If you drink
Some
alcohol or
people may
take
have
medicines
nausea,
that make you drowsy,
diarrhea,
or if you
bruising,
experience
perhaps
increased
as well.
gambling,
Some people may
sexual, or
have
other
muscle
intense
cramps or loss
urges.
of appetite, or may feel tired.
No prescription.
From the moment that man first discovered that the fermented juice from fruits had a kick unequaled by other forms of refreshment, much time and effort has been spent in the production of such spirits. Throughout history, these fermented and eventually distilled spirits have played an important role in many areas of man's life. Serving man's pleasure, they have also served another role as a consistent basis of revenue production. While taxes have come and gone on other commodities or services, taxes on alcohol and tobacco have been a primary source of this nation's operational funds.
Earlier films and advertisements emphasize how attitudes towards alcohol change from decade to decade. From full prohibition in the 1920s to a culture in the 1950s where alcohol was looked on humorously, America has yet to make up its mind about the ethics of drinking. Over time, alcohol has been found to be a disinhibitor, a depressant, a cultural influence, as well as a toxic substance. These four qualities of alcohol can also lead to problematic levels of use, including abuse and addiction.
First time I got drunk, it was like, I liked the feeling, so I tried to drink more and more. So I thought if I drank more, I'd feel more and more better.
One of the desired effects of alcohol is its ability to lower inhibitions, and so drinkers are more likely to do things they normally wouldn't do.
We're gonna get drunk, of course, and we're gonna have a good time. And if it comes down to throwing couches in the middle of the street,
hey, we'll do it.
We'll do it.
Hey, we'll do it.
This disinhibition occurs because of alcohol's effect on the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that is in charge of decision-making and helps control desires and impulses generated by the parts of the brain that contain emotions.
And I could be more extroverted and outgoing with alcohol, whereas I always felt I was more shy and introverted, and alcohol allowed me to be loud, boisterous, opinionated, and I didn't have to be held accountable.
It affects the frontal lobes, the front part of your brain, which in human beings is the largest part of the brain. It's 30% of the human brain. That's the part of your brain involved with thoughtfulness, forethought, planning, concentration, organization, thinking before you say things, thinking before you do things.
The disinhibition is caused by alcohol's effect on two neurotransmitters, dopamine and GABA. Alcohol increases the release of dopamine, an excitatory brain chemical that affects the emotional center, resulting in the loss of impulse control. It also enhances the effects of GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter in the prefrontal cortex. This disrupts the ability to inhibit socially inappropriate impulses, making one more likely to say or do something stupid.
I'm sorry, but my experience, they get violent, they get derogatory. Women, they just drink and they have a good time.
We turn into so much fun.
We become like sort of the victim of the men drinking.
More beers.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it goes. I don't know. That's just my experience.
50% of all murders, 25% of all suicides, and 40% of all admissions to mental health hospitals occur while under the influence of alcohol, most likely because of the disinhibition, leading to a deadly release of anger and distorted thinking.
You get in fights, you wake up next morning, you don't know how you got home, and people tell you about things you did, and the night before when you was drunk, you can't remember it because you have blackouts. At least I know I did.
In trauma surgery, I would guess the majority of patients that we see have alcohol involved. In motor vehicle crashes, for example, 35% we know are legally drunk when they arrive in the emergency room. For domestic violence, it's much higher. For assaults, it's probably close to 80%.
20% of male alcoholics and 50% of female alcoholics have been sexually abused, often by predators who have lowered their inhibitions by drinking.
I've been raped several times, and in that, I think that I started to drink because it took that away.
This is for the kids of America.
Listen,
drink responsibly, please.
People feel like taking a drink when they're excited, and want to have fun at a football game or something, not to get down. They actually drink to get up. And if you look at most of the quote downers, there is an initial euphoric stimulative phase, which is then, of course, followed by a depressant phase.
Depending on the amount drunk and the makeup of the drinker, the apparent stimulation caused by alcohol starts to be overtaken by its depressant effects within an hour or two. The effects start first in the cerebellum, the part of the brain that controls movement, then in the brainstem, which regulates breathing, and finally in the cerebrum, the thinking brain, which controls speech, thought, and vision. It also has a major impact on one's mood.
It's just initially that I feel I feel good. And then after that, it's just I'm riding along on a physical stupor where I'm just inebriated and I just don't think about what I'm doing anymore.
The use of alcohol as a social lubricant and as a sedative likely started thousands of years ago. Since then, it has been integrated into the culture of most every society.
When I was coming up, everybody drank. I mean, couldn't wait till I was told, when I was about 12 years old, only way you get hair on your chest is have a drink. The older people really didn't so much mind you drinking as long as you didn't act a fool behind it.
Germany and the United States are known as mixed drinking cultures. That is, alcohol is used with meals as well as between meals, often in a binge pattern, to get high or just to feel good.
When I was at a party a day before my birthday, and we was drinking Bacardi 151, and I didn't really like it, but I just drank it anyway because that's all that there was to drink there. And I got drunk, real drunk, and started acting stupid.
Many European countries, such as France and Italy, are known as wet drinking cultures, where most alcohol use is a family affair.
When we celebrate things in family, we have a meal with it. We're not drinking alcohol, just only alcohol. The wine and things like this come with a meal. Nobody is going to come out of that completely drunk. We may be probably happy because we drink a little bit, but we won't be drunk.
Even though humankind has had thousands of years to assimilate alcohol culturally, it can still cause physical problems because it is a protoplasmic poison. That is, it can kill cells on contact. The body tries to do all it can to rid itself of the toxin.
So by the end of the night, I'd probably had about 15 beers, and I couldn't walk, and I remember throwing up on the way to his car, and I threw up in his car, and I don't remember that much. All I remember is throwing up.
The liver tries to protect the body from alcohol by metabolizing it at a faster rate. It does this by creating little metabolic factories which turn the alcohol into carbon dioxide and water. This encourages drinkers to consume more to get the same effects, a process called tolerance. In a number of cases, with long-term high-dose use, the liver is pushed to its limits.
And your liver expands and it contracts when you drink and you stop drinking. At some point when you stop, your liver's going to turn into a raisin. It's not going to expand anymore. That's when your liver's fried.
What I'm holding in my hand are 2 sections of liver from adults. This is from a healthy, normally functioning liver. This specimen is from a cirrhotic liver. What happens with continual exposure to alcohol and the buildup of the toxins is the hepatocytes die, and replacing them, you see this bumpy texture, is scar tissue that permeates throughout the liver. And eventually, you have a completely non-functioning organ.
Other organs are affected by long-term heavy use of alcohol, particularly the brain, heart, kidneys, and stomach.
After 30 years of drinking, I have developed mitral valve prolapse, a heart condition, fibromyalgia, the deterioration of my muscles. I have the early stages of osteoporosis. I have an ulcer in my esophagus. My memory is not good at this point of 48 days of sobriety. It's hard for me to make decisions. And I probably have lost 15 years of my natural life due to my alcoholism.
Because alcohol is toxic to cells, drinking during pregnancy can cause nerve damage or tissue damage to the fetus, consequences that last a lifetime.
Wally's birth mom was severe alcoholic. I mean, I never got to really meet her, to sit down and talk to her. But I know that when she went into labor, she was in a bar and had fallen off a bar stool. And she was so intoxicated that they said that when Wally was born, he reeked of alcohol.
There are various patterns of alcohol use that range from abstinence and experimentation to abuse and addiction. It is usually the frequency and amount drunk that determines the severity of the problems.
Alcohol isn't necessarily an evil drug. That is, if people do not have contraindications to drinking. Contraindications are things like pregnancy, or taking medications that will be affected by alcohol, or somebody who's had alcohol dependence in the past, and I would look at them as still in recovery.
Other contraindications for use of alcohol, even in small amounts, would be pre-existing physical or mental health problems, digestive problems like stomach ulcers or hepatitis, someone with a high genetic and environmental susceptibility, or a worker in a dangerous profession.
Alcohol and work does not mix, and that's why I've got all my appendages because if I'm gonna drink, I won't work, and if I work, and then I don't drink.
The desired effects of alcohol are dose-dependent, as are the unwanted side effects. 1 or 2 drinks have a number of health benefits, such as lowering the risk of heart disease, but as the amount drunk increases, the severity of the effects increases. Episodic high-dose use is often referred to as binge drinking. In surveys, it is defined as having 5 or more drinks at one sitting for men and 4 or more for women. Both amounts, if drunk within 2 hours, would push the blood alcohol above the legal limit. Intoxication that impairs a drinker's ability to function versus legal intoxication that can get one arrested are often quite different.
A DUI would definitely curb my drinking. Like, if I got a Dewey right now, I would be hating life. You know, that's like a year you don't drive.
Episodes of intoxication, including those involving high-dose use, should not automatically be defined as alcoholism, particularly in high school and college. The real question is, are there any serious consequences, and will this pattern of drinking continue to progress?
We had like a couple gallons of Canadian Mist, and we mixed that with Squirt, and I drank for about a fifth of it, and just a whole bunch of Squirt, and just, I don't know, I was coughing, I was puking up blood, and I had blood coming out my nose, and it was all messed up. I passed out, and I didn't wake up for like a day and a half.
Putting a guy in the ground did nothing for our feeling of us being, that indestructible, kids that we were, that age of, God, we're young and strong, and, there's nothing we can't do, or there's no consequences to this behavior. And even seeing it, going to the funeral, watching the hearse drive by, it was like, duh, didn't make the connection.
Extreme amounts of alcohol, when the blood alcohol level is 5 or more times the legal limit, can be fatal.
Alcohol poisoning is basically a young person's disease, and about the only setting where you hear about it is in one of these students who's pledging a fraternity. The reason that you don't hear about it occurring in older people is that, as with all drugs, you develop tolerance.
As alcohol is used to lower inhibitions, as it relaxes and depresses, as the culture encourages heavy drinking, as the toxic effects increase, and as the level of use advances, abuse and addiction become more likely.
Alcohol was always my primary drug of choice. And I pretty much, from the moment I started drinking, I drank as often as possible. The more I drank, the more I figured out how to continue that on. And of course, being drunk morning, noon, and night lands you in AA pretty quick.
In spite of all the tremendous, just exciting research that's going on with alcohol in terms of its brain scans, in terms of understanding how it affects the development of the brain, understanding how it impacts behavior so much, there's still a tremendous awareness gap or a lack of appreciation for the understanding of that knowledge. We have individuals, when we do the testing that shows that 76% of those who test as having problems with alcohol, when we ask them about it, they claim they're not having problems with alcohol. Well, that needs to be addressed. That gap needs to be closed so people appreciate their problems much earlier, avail themselves to treatment much earlier, and therefore really decrease the devastating consequences that alcohol can have on their lives.